everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name's Emily, and on this channel we talk about everything books. So today is my September wrap-up, and I'm hoping it'll be a quick one because most of the books that I read in September were vlogged in some way or another. So I'm gonna go over the vlogged books first, and then I think I only have like 3 or 4 to go over that weren't vlogged. So anything that was in another video, I'm not going to talk too much about. I'm just going to give my rating and overall thoughts on it. Sometimes I get a little chatty though, so sorry if that happens. But the first vlog I did in September was a mood reading vlog. So I kind of went a little bit, off TBR and picked books that I was just really in the mood to read, because I believe this is when I started to go into a book slump, and I'll talk through that. But the first book I read this month was The Legacy by Elle Kennedy, which is the final book in the Off-Campus series. This is just essentially a collection of 4 novellas, one for each couple, and it's an extended epilogue, for lack of a better term. I gave this 3.75 and 1.5 on Spice. I did like this. It was a nice conclusion to the series. Then I read The Reappearance of Rachel Price by Holly Jackson, and I do have to say that this book did get me a little bit at the end. I didn't exactly see what was coming. I got the gist of it like as the story went on, but she still did surprise me with the overall twist at the end. So if you like a good fast-paced YA thriller, this was probably better in my opinion than 5 Survive. So definitely try this one. This is about Belle, whose mother Rachel Price went missing when she was younger, and she was actually there when her mom went missing but doesn't remember it. And years later, this film company's there filming a documentary about her mom's disappearance, and then all of a sudden her mother reappears. And she doesn't know what's really happened and who to believe and all that. So very good twist at the end, I think. 4 stars, half spice. Then I read Hallie and Henry's book from the Maple Hill series. This is the 3rd book in the series. This is like sports romance, but I think that Hannah Grace does a really good job at touching on some tougher topics. Hallie was every Swifty's dream female lead character, I think. She embodied so many things that I think women truly are and do, and how we feel in our feelings and everything. And I really related to Henry and how he handles stress and how he kind of just locks himself away and doesn't want to deal with other people when he's stressed because he just wants to deal with it on his own. So really related to both of these characters a lot. Loved this book. It is probably my favorite in the series so far. 4.5 stars, 1.5 spice. And then the last book I read in that vlog was The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. This is I would say maybe like a gothic fantasy. It takes place around the time of the Spanish Inquisition and follows a girl that is like a servant in this house that's not like a very wealthy house. There's only 2 servants. She's one of 2, and she has like magic and accidentally uses it and gets caught by the woman of the house, and the woman tries to like use her to get attention from some of the more wealthier houses, and it ends up backfiring on her and getting this girl way too much attention. And it's the story of her basically fighting to be like the head magic user for, I forget what his title was, the king maybe? I can't remember if it was supposed to be for the king or for somebody that like is high up in the king's court, but it was just like magical competition and everything, and there was a character that was a love interest, and there was a lot of like weird, I don't know how to describe it exactly, but that was essentially what it was. There was a little bit of a trial with her trying to win favor of one of the king's higher guards to be this like magical servant essentially for the kingdom. It was interesting, definitely different than what I thought it was going to be, and I did really enjoy it. It was a little difficult to get into because you have to understand the magic system and what's happening in the world, but once you get that, it was a very good story. 4 stars, 1 spice. This is the time of the month that I was really in a book slump, these next few vlogs. So the next 2 are, the first 3 books are part 1 of trying to get out of a reading slump, and the second 3 are, again, part 2 of trying to get out of a reading slump. And I still think I'm a little bit in one, but I'm definitely better than I was at the beginning of the month. So the first book I read after the book that put me into a reading slump was The Rule Book by Sarah Adams, and this is a football romance of exes. It's a second chance romance, and he's an NFL tight end, and he's kind of struggling to get back into the game after an injury that everyone is saying was like career threatening. He's never going to play again, all that stuff. And he needs a new agent because his agent had to like quit unexpectedly, and his ex-girlfriend from college works at the same agency and he doesn't know that, and she's assigned to him, and it just goes from there, let me tell you. But this was kind of a different take on that kind of a situation where like one of them breaks up with the other in college for a reason and the other one's heartbroken and doesn't understand why. It was a different take on that, but I enjoyed it. Sarah Adams writes really cute books. This only had like one spicy scene in it because she writes typically closed door romances. This was her first open door, but it's one chapter. So I did really enjoy this. It's 3.75.5 spice. Then I read Cross the Line by Simone Saltani, and this is an F1 romance. F1's not really my cup of tea. I don't really like racing or anything, but this was a really cute story. It was brother's best friend's little sister, and she gets hired by him when he has like a few things go wrong with his previous social media coordinator where he like upset her and she kind of screwed him over. So she went to school for that, I think, and she's currently trying to find a job in marketing media kind of things, and he sees her at an event with her brother and is like, perfect, like you can travel with me for this circuit and help get my social media appearance and reputation back up. And throughout that they have feelings for each other, and something had happened between them about a year before that sets all of that off. So probably wasn't the best situation to offer her that job, but it's a romance novel. Something's got to be like that. So this was really cute. Again, for not liking the sport, I did really enjoy the book. This was a 3.75 and a 1.5 spice. Then I read Ruthless Fae, which is the second book in the Zodiac Academy series, and that really, I think, started to catapult me out of the reading slump. That is the second book in a series about two twin sisters that were raised in the human world as changelings, but they're actually fairies and heirs to the throne of Solaria. And at their 18th birthday, they get taken back into the Fae Kingdom and go to this school, and they have to learn how to use their powers and all of that. And there's these other 4 families that are ruling in their stead together, and the heirs from that are like bullies to them and everything. So this was just a continuation of that story from the first one. There was more magic. This was definitely more enjoyable than the first one. The first one had me a little not sure if I wanted to continue, but I did know that the books got better as you went along. The bullying in the first one was a little much. There's still a little bit of a bully romance in this, a bully situation, even with people that I don't necessarily think either girl will end up with, but there's still like a little bit of bullying there. But it was definitely not as bad as the first one, and you can see that like the relationships and the character development it's going to happen. We're just not there yet. But fast-paced, like addictive writing books. I love these. I'm so excited to continue on and read the other 7, I think. I think there's 9 total books. Well, 9 and then an 8.5, so 10 books. So I still have 8 more to read, and that will not be finished this year. I think I'm going to try to read 1 more before the end of the year, but 4.25, 1 spice. Loved it. Definitely a fantasy book to help get out of a slump because they move so fast. And I don't usually say to read a fantasy book to get out of a slump, especially since a fantasy book put me into my slump, but I digress. Then continuing trying to get out of the slump, I read Vow of Thieves, which if you watch the vlogs, I read throughout both of them because I was having a lot of trouble getting through this book. I was enjoying it, but mindset-wise, I just wasn't fully there, I don't think. And the storyline was good. I liked these characters, but it took about 100 to 200 pages for me to really lock in on this story. So this is the second in the duology, and it follows Kazi and Jace after the events, obviously, in the first book, and what happens and what they have to deal with from the things that happened at the end of the first book. I can't really say anything more about that. Like, Kazi worked for the queen, and Jace, like, ruled this area of the kingdom that was kind of oversaw by another king, but he wanted that part of the kingdom to be looked at as part of the overall kingdom, but he still wanted his family to be in charge of it. It's very difficult to describe, but there's a beautiful romance in these books and a little bit of a betrayal in this one that I didn't see coming. I don't know if I'd call it a betrayal, but it was a little bit of like a something you should see coming, but at the same time I didn't see it playing out the way it did from the first book. But really enjoyed this. They're fast-paced if you're probably in the right mindset for it. The first book I read, no problem. The second half of this book, no problem. It was the first half of this one I had trouble getting in 2. And I think, again, it was because a fantasy book put me into the slump. So it was hard for me to try to get out of that with a fantasy book. 425, One Spice as well. Then I read 27 Minutes by Ashley Tate. This is a thriller about a boy who, well, it follows a few different people. It follows 4 different point of views. And there was this tragedy that happened, I think 10 years ago by the time we're in this book. And this boy's sister was killed in a car accident and nobody really knows what happened. And he was there and he waited 27 minutes to call for help. And they told him that if he'd called earlier, he could have saved his sister. I figured this one out before the end. So that didn't help its rating. But overall, it was a very interesting read. Every person's point of view that you're reading from is definitely like mentally not stable. And I'm not saying that in like a mean way, but you're definitely like, these people need help. And nobody's getting it for them. It's a very small town. And I just think everyone turns a blind eye to some of the stuff that was happening and some of the things that people were doing. The one girl's family didn't, but she just didn't want to listen to them. But it was an interesting read. For what it was a thriller. If you're gonna catch on to it like I did, like the big aha moment, I figured out well before it happened, so it didn't really hit that hard. But it was still a fast-paced, interesting read. So I gave it 3 stars and 0 spice. And then the last book in my getting out of a slump era was How to Become the Dark Lord and Die Trying. And this is the first book in the Lord Dobby series, Dark Lord Dobby series. And it's about this girl who's stuck in this like Groundhog Day kind of situation, video games type of situation where she's supposed to be defeating the Dark Lord in this world. And every time she dies, she starts at the same point. So she has like endless lives. And it's always different every time, like whatever, based on the path she takes. Like it always starts off the same, but the path changes. And after like so many lives, because I think it starts like somewhere in the 200s, she finally gives up and she's like, you know what? I'm just going to be the Dark Lord this time instead of trying to kill the Dark Lord or defeat the Dark Lord. So she goes on this quest to get to the like, what do they call it? It's like the competition to be the Dark Lord. And she picks up all these people along the way. And I didn't say this in the vlog, but the best way to describe this is like a satirical, funny version of Daenerys Targaryen in Game of Thrones. And if you've seen that, you might understand what I'm saying. But like that was her journey throughout this book. Was very similar to Daenerys Targaryen's. Very funny, a little interesting in the way that a male author wrote a female mind and some of the things that he said and did. Some of it was a little weird, but it was still a really good time. I probably will continue this series whenever the next book comes out just because it was fun. 3.75 and 1 spice. Then I set out on the quest to finish my TBR for the month because I was very much so behind. So in about a week and a half, I was trying to read 6 books and I was still a little slumpy. I'm still a little slumpy. So we started with Daisy Hates the Great Undoing, and I freaking loved this book. Can't talk again about too much that happens. It is the 4th book in the Magnolia Parks universe, the 2nd book in the Daisy Hates series, and it follows the same timeline as the 2nd Magnolia Parks book, but from Daisy, Christian, and Julian's point of view, and I was very excited to see Julian's point of view in this based on what happened in the 2nd Magnolia Parks book. I do not like Magnolia. I read her books because I have to in order to make these make sense. But I'm definitely a Daisy Hates girly. I love these books so much more. I cannot wait to see what happens after the cliffhanger that this book ended up with. So, 4.5 stars, 2 spice. These books are kind of spicy. This one was a little bit more spicy than the first one, but it doesn't take away from the story, I don't think. You should see the mess I'm making on the floor right now with all these books. The 2nd book I read in that vlog was Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. This is the 2nd book in the Emily Wilde, I believe, trilogy. I think it's going to be a trilogy. I really need to look that up because I say this every time I talk about these books. But anyway, the compendium of something or another comes out in February, which is the next book. And this just continues again Emily and Bumblebee's book story from the first book. And they're on a new adventure together. And it is a little bit more personal. It is more high stakes. The romance really kicks up in this one. It was less cozy fantasy and more romantic-y, a little higher fantasy, because I guess, again, the stakes were higher, but still not like a high fantasy. Really liked this book as well. Oh my gosh, I said 4.5 for Daisy Hates. It was 4.75. Scratch that. This was a 4.5, and I think just 1 or half on spice. Half on spice, not very spicy, but the romancy got a little bit upped. Then my favorite read of the month, Keeping 13 by Chloe Walsh, the second book in the Boys of Tommen series. The ramp up of Johnny and Shannon in their relationship, but also the stakes and what is going on in Shannon's life. And this book was heart-wrenching and beautifully written, and I just forget that these characters are so young because of the content and like what's going on and what they're dealing with. I try to forget it too, just because it's weird to think that they're like 16 and 17. But the story itself is beautifully written, and again, there's like a nice found family in this for Shannon, and then also for her brother Joey, who I get to read his story next. I'm very excited for that. But this was a nice segue into his story, and I'm not sure exactly what Saving Six timeline follows. I don't know if there's overlap, but based on how this ended, I'm very excited to go into his story. And I think I know something that's going to happen based on how he was acting in this last one, but very excited to continue this series. Loved this book. Love Johnny and Shannon. Love Johnny. Johnny Kavanaugh is like, he's a man, even though he's like 17 or 18 in this book, and that's really weird to say because I'm a lot older than that. But anyway, I'm loving the series so far. 5 stars, 2 spice. Then I read Tales from the Shadowhunters Academy. This was one of the 3 Shadowhunters books I had to read this month in order to keep on track to finish this universe by the end of the year. And I really liked this one. This might have been my favorite out of the 3. I didn't talk about the one because I read it outside of a vlog, and I will talk about the other one in a minute. But this follows a character from the Mortal Instruments, and it's like a bunch of different stories of his time after the events that happened at the end of that series. And I didn't know we were going to get this. I didn't know that that's who this followed. I didn't think that this is who it actually is. But I loved it. I loved every part of it. I think it was definitely deeper, and it went more into consequences of what happened in those books and what they're now all living with. So definitely enjoyed that. Loved where it took the story. It was, again, kind of an extended epilogue for these characters, even though I think I still get to see them in the Dark Artifices. And then I did read today. I literally just read about that trilogy today, and I can't remember what it's called. But I know that the characters from the Mortal Instruments will be in the new trilogy that comes out in 2026 because of the characters that follows, which are characters that are going to be in the Dark Artifices, but like a different generation of that. I don't know how to explain it, but we're still going to have Mortal Instruments characters for a little bit longer. 4 stars, half spice. That's just a wee bit. Then I read Adore in the Dark by Scott Rentigen. This book surprised me. It is a young adult fantasy thriller. Fantasy because it's a very unique magic system. I talk about it more in that vlog, but very interesting world, very interesting magic system. They end up going through this portal, a few students, 4 scholarship kids, 2 like rich kids, and when they get onto the other side of this portal, one of them arrives dead. And they're in the middle of nowhere, and they have to get back to their like home area of this land, and they have to go through the woods and everything, and it's like high stakes. Something is chasing them through the woods trying to kill them. So it is more thriller, I'd say, than fantasy. There is magic, but it's like a thriller with magic, if I could just describe it the best way. Definitely will be continuing this series because Ren, our main character, has some secrets, and we find out some of them secrets at the end of the book, but I think there's a lot more where that came from. So if you want a good YA fantasy thriller, which is not something I think I read too often, highly, highly recommend. 4.25 stars, and I'd say like half to 1 spice. Then I read The Lost Book of the White. This is the second book in the Eldest Curses duology, and also in the Shadowhunters universe. This one was a little slower for me. I wish it was a little bit faster paced. Again, it was the characters that I connect the most with because it was your Mortal Instruments characters, and it followed the events that happened in the Shadowhunters Academy. And I will say it again, read the books in the order that I'm reading them. And I will go over all of that at the end of the year, but you can find that order on Cassandra Clare's website or like in a blog somewhere. That's where I found it. But it makes so much sense, and it makes the stories just flow. So this took place after the events in the Shadowhunters Academy. Tales from the Shadowhunters Academy. So not directly actually after the first Eldest Curses book. There is time in between there that is filled in by 3 Mortal Instruments books as well as the Tales from the Shadowhunters Academy. So this was Magnus central, I would say, and I didn't like the Magnus that we got in this book. So it wasn't my favorite. I thought I was going to like this a lot more, but I still love Magnus. So any book you put him in, I'm going to read it. But it took me a little bit longer to get into this one. There was a lot of like inner dialogue in this, and again, deeper thoughts and everything from the characters. So it wasn't like the fun, fast-paced timelines you get with the Mortal Instruments. It was definitely more like introspective, I think. But I still gave it 4 stars because I still enjoyed it and like half spice. On to the 3 books I read outside of a vlog. The first was the Bane Chronicles. So I read this towards the beginning of the month. I read it before the other 2 Shadowhunters Academy books. And this is, I think, supposed to be something that Magnus said he wrote to kind of tell people about his past and some of the stories that he talks about all the time. So this is just a bunch of short stories of Magnus's past. And you see characters from, I think there are characters from the Mortal Instruments in here. And definitely ones from the Infernal Devices. So if you liked that series, there are characters from that in here. And then I think also characters that are going to be in The Last Hours, if I know who The Last Hours is about. So it kind of brought everybody together, even though you haven't met all of those characters yet if you're reading it in this order, but everything still makes sense. So I liked this a lot. I love Magnus. This was probably the middle of my favorites of the 2. I still gave this 4 stars. Most of the Shadowhunters books are just like 4-star reads for me. Some of them are 4.25, 4.5. I think the City of Heavenly Fire, which is the last book in the Mortal Instruments, has been the highest one I've rated, and that was 4.5. But still, don't need to read this. You don't really need to read anything outside of, I think, the like main series, but they definitely add a lot of context. And if you enjoy the character stories and like the characters as much as I do, you'll probably like them. I don't even know if I gave that any spice. It was 4 stars, but I don't even remember much spice. I read Mixed Signals by B.K. Borison, the 3rd book in the Lovelight Farm series. I just finished this book, and I liked this more than In the Weeds. And I don't know if I rated this higher than I rated Lovelight Farms, because that was like a year ago now. But 3.75, 1 spice. The story is about Layla and Caleb. Caleb was, and I think I said this when I read In the Weeds, that I thought Caleb was a cop, and then all of a sudden in The Weeds he was a teacher, because that did happen. He was too nice to be a deputy, so he became a substitute teacher, and Layla is the baker on Lovelight Farms, and you see a lot of them in the previous 2 books, and that Caleb definitely has feelings for Layla, and she's just, you know, unawares, because he comes to the bakery all the time, he flirts with her all the time, he gets like, you know, nervous in front of her all the time, and she just has a tendency to date jerks and can't get over that. So they kind of start into like a, well, let's practice dating with each other so that you can understand what it feels like to be appreciated, and I can practice dating for the next girl that I want to date because I'm weird on dates, kind of thing. And of course we know how that ends. But I gave this a 3.75 because the reason she said she was attracted to him at the beginning was because she saw him at a bar in a Hawaiian shirt. And then she continued to talk about the Hawaiian shirt way too much. And I'm sorry, that just doesn't do it for me. So the fact that that's what got her interested, I didn't understand it. But still an enjoyable read. I'm excited for the final book. I hope it's good because I do like Charlie. I think it's Charlie and Nova, and I'm excited for their story. The book that put me into a reading slump. And if you haven't seen my vlogs, this might surprise you, because it didn't put me into a slump because it was so good that I didn't want to read anything after it. It put me into a slump because it took me so long to read. And I'm going to preface this by saying I read this on Kindle when I went to Disney. So I was trying to read it over the course of a week when I was very tired and I didn't have a lot of time to read. And that could be why this was an issue, but the book is When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. I went into this book expecting to devour it and love it based on how people talked about it, which is why I thought it was a safe choice to take on my Kindle to read in Disney, because it was so long. I figure, well, you know what? Instead of trying to read a bunch of small books, I'll just focus on getting this brick off of my TBR over that week. I struggled. I didn't not like this book. The second half was definitely better, and I don't know that I just didn't give it a fair shot because of the circumstances to which I read it. The good news is the second book in the series doesn't come out until like October of next year. So I have a year to possibly reread this and decide if I want to continue with the series. I did like the story. I didn't love the two main characters, and I didn't love their relationship. I didn't feel it, honestly. But that could just be me. Maybe I'm broken, but I know a lot of people love this book. And it was an interesting magic system, and I love the dragon aspect of it. I just feel like I didn't get enough to be invested in the characters. I felt like there wasn't enough world building for me, and I know she intentionally tried to not do that, but this book is huge. Like, there was room for world building. You didn't have to, like, confuse me for half the book. So, I still gave it a 4-star, I think is what I gave it. Yeah, I struggled with that. I was between, like, a 3.5, 4. I should have probably went with a 3.75 just because I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I could have, but I also don't think I like it as much as a lot of people have said they liked it. Just put me in a slump. I'm gonna say it. I know that's probably gonna make some people not happy, but it is what it is. I think I gave it like a 1 or 2 on Spice. A 1. I honestly wish more of this book stuck with me, and I probably will give it another shot at some point next year. Hopefully it's still on Kindle Unlimited, because this book would not be easy to read physically. But what I don't know if I can say it, but what I didn't like is that every so often there was a diary entry, and you don't find out who the person whose diary it is. You don't find out who that person is for a good chunk of the book. And I was not invested in the diary entries because I didn't know who the hell it was. And had I known, I might have cared a little more. Because once I found out who it was, I liked reading them more. So I think the flow of the book was just messed up for me, and it just wasn't done in a way like I'm rambling now, but it wasn't done in a way like Fourth Wing, where she didn't intentionally do world building, but it was there and it was done well. I was just confused. So, thoughts on that. Didn't hate it. Could have liked it more maybe. We'll see. I'll try again next year, but I didn't DNF it. I did finish it, so that is all, I think, 19 books that I read this month. So let me know if you've read any of these, what your thoughts are on them. If any of these are in a series that you love that you can't wait for me to continue, let me know in the comments below. Let me know what your favorite book you read in September was. And if you haven't seen my TBR chooses for October, I am trying to clear my TBR cart of the books that are currently on it. I do have books that are not on it by the end of the year, which means I have to read 18 books off of that cart each month to finish it by the end of the year. So my next few vlogs will be getting through that for accountability, but check out that video if you haven't to see what books I'm going to be trying to get through in the month of October. And I thank you all so much if you've made it this far, and I hope to see you in the next video.